Welcome, nutritionradio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry, university nutrition professor of over 20 years and podcast host of long-running shows like Iron Radio. Come on in. Fitness Fridays. Hey, everybody. Just a little housekeeping before we start. I just want to thank everybody, a little bit of gratitude for the people who have made some comments or reviews and that sort of thing. It really does help motivate, to keep doing this sort of thing. Season 1, I'm looking at about 100 episodes. Then we'll kind of pause momentarily, see where we are. It may be the case that we end up doing a once-a-week thing. Actually, there's some inefficiencies with this everyday thing. I thought maybe I'd record everything in a batch and put it up, schedule it throughout the week. That sort of works. But actually, there's a lot of wasted time at the beginning and end of each episode with the bumpers and all that kind of thing. So maybe just insert each one of these daily bumpers into a single hour-long thing. Maybe record Iron Radio with the guys, then do this. I hope there's some synergy between these two things. Iron Radio was around for so long, really started before there was such a glut of podcasts, and I mean a glut. I was just reading on Facebook about how even AI, now you've got these artificial podcasters. Enough. It's just out of control. I've never been a fan that more views or more hits or more clicks means higher quality. That's not necessarily the case, but I digress. Today is about fitness, and I'm going to offer this little editorial here. It'll just be brief. Hopefully something to jar you out of your rut on your commute to work. I just saw a piece in U.S. News and World Report about why taking your kids to the park is always a healthy idea. It was pretty light fare, but it did include some adult-relevant reminders, like people who spend time in nature have lower levels of stress and depression. It's also fun to be outdoors. Now, I'm not going to reference that. I shouldn't have to. The point is, the article got me thinking about how my wife and I hit the trails instead of hitting the treadmill these days, particularly here in Ohio, where the weather's been cool and perfect, aside from some soggy days making the trails muddy in spots. There aren't even many mosquitoes yet. I will say that a few times we found ourselves on pretty flat trails, and I do need some inclines or declines to approach what you might call gym intensity. My left knee won't stand for the jogging that would make a flat trail worthwhile, at least from like an HIIT perspective. That's all right by me. I never liked running, at least not after my body mass index got high enough to make me feel like it was just orthopedically unwise. Plus, I do interval stuff a couple of times a week indoors. I think what's been on my mind lately is the fact that when I'm in the woods or along a lake, I'm surrounded by life. Trees, flowering plants, little critters, not dead things like styrene carpet, synthetic rubber, neon lights, lunk alarms. You know what I'm talking about. None of these things are living. They're not respiring things. It's no wonder articles like the one from Kira Murez for the U.S. News and World Report there embrace the outdoors. I feel like there's some deep-lying part of our DNA that remembers the many generations before we lived in cities, when we hunted and gathered and were nomadic. Always walking and hiking, we're built for it. And while I'm at it, I also recommend lifting outside in whichever way you can safely do it. I have fond memories of lifting out at Ocean Beach or Pacific Beach near San Diego, on the roof of a gym that I doubt still exists, or at World's Gym at Venice Beach. The energy and the pump made all the better by the sun and the fresh air. It was glorious. In more recent years, I've actually found myself just out back with a couple of dumbbells or an Olympic bar with just one plate on the side in my backyard. It brought back memories of Arnold's biography, which I've read several times. I suggest you do too, The Education of a Bodybuilder, and how they would squat and just drink beer in the forest somewhere. Hopefully not at the same time, but you get my point. Just lifting outside is also a good thing. Now, I don't want to be dismissive regarding this article that I've been talking about, because getting kids out in nature when they're young, I'm sure it has quite an impression on them in formative kinds of ways. But I'm old, so I'm talking about adults right now. Obviously, if you have experiences with kids or however you do it, I'm all ears. You can leave a comment to the backup to this little audio clip on our YouTube. It's lawnman07. You can even fire me an email, lawnman7@hotmail.com. I know the barriers are higher for some of you than others. Maybe you don't have a car, there's no nearby trails, or you don't even have a decent yard where you can just go out there with a dumbbell and lift. I know even when I've done that, I had the feeling that the neighbors are like, what's this guy up to? right? It's just not something you typically do, squatting out there or deadlifting or doing cleans or something out in the mulch bed. Now, another thing I want to bring up is I'm talking about like lifting weights or hiking, getting outside. I'm not talking about sports outside. That's an obvious kind of thing, I suppose. Obviously, when you do sports, you can up the intensity and that sort of thing. I'm talking more like a solo thing, just out in nature, purposely get your heart rate up, get your muscles working, that sort of thing. Exercise, not sport, if that makes any sense. Exercise is defined as something that's purposeful, repetitive, right? And combining that with being around living things. I mean, other than people on a sports team or something like that. Not to say that obviously going on trail hikes and that kind of stuff with a friend or a spouse can't be a good way to pass that time. The truth is, it just makes more sense to go do something. I remember Franco Columbu, I think it was, mentioning years and years ago that he was being admonished by his dad or a grandpa or an uncle or something about lifting all those heavy weights and not getting paid to do it. I think it's actually similar in that regard. I mean, I don't think there's any way I could explain to my great-grandfather why I go to this synthetic place, this indoor place, and exert myself lifting heavy things or running on a rubberized treadmill loop. It just doesn't make as much sense as actually going outside for a hike. There's something more true to nature and just less weird when you think about it, about how society works now. Our jobs are so sedentary that we have to go to these special places and spend, between $10 and $60 a month or more just to actually move. But I've rambled enough on this little fitness installment. That's my friendly reminder to listeners. Get outside and out of your rut. If you're lucky enough to have a gym with an external patio or something, rejoice. You're doing yourself a favor as deep as your DNA. See you next time. The NutritionRadio.org podcast is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, check with your physician, nutritionist, or qualified exercise physiologist in order to make the progress that you need.